In February of this year, I read a piece on the internet that said it had been 30 years since Toy Caldwell passed away. And it got me to thinking back about him and the Marshall Tucker Band. Here are a few stories about him and the band that you might be interested in. If you enjoy the video, I'd appreciate if you'd subscribe to the channel. Now let's get to it. Toy Caldwell was born on November 13, 1947, in Spartanburg, South Carolina. He began playing guitar along with his brother Tommy at a young age and developed a unique style of playing the electric guitar, using his thumb instead of a pick. Toy played basketball and football in high school with his friends George McCorkle, Jerry Eubanks, and Doug Gray, who would all later become members of the Marshall Tucker Band. While very involved in sports, all the boys eventually became interested in music. By the age of 16, Toy was passionate about music, sports, and his other obsession, motorcycles. He also enjoyed hunting and fishing. After school, Toy decided to serve the country and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 1966. He reported for recruit training at Parris Island, South Carolina. Later, he was shipped off to Vietnam, and in September 1968, after being wounded, he was evacuated for 2 weeks, but then returned for duty. Toy was discharged in 1969 and once again began playing music with his old high school buddies. His younger brother Tommy joined the Marines right after Toy's return home, but he was medically discharged right after graduation in 1970. Soon after his return, he would join up with his brother Toy, Doug Gray, Jerry Eubanks, George McCorkle, and Paul Riddle, and together they would form what was to become the Marshall Tucker Band. At this time, the band was called the Toy Factory, but that name just didn't seem to be going over. So in search of a new name, while rehearsing in a rented warehouse, the name decided on was Marshall Tucker. So here's the story of how that name came about. First off, to answer the question, was there really someone named Marshall Tucker? The answer to that is yes, there was. Did the band know him? No, they didn't. But here's how Mr. Tucker himself told the story. And I'm going to quote this from an interview done in 2020 by a gentleman named Jack Lund. I'll leave a link in the description box for the full interview. Mr. Tucker said, "I was renting a warehouse space from a fellow named Abe Smith around 1967 or 68. This warehouse was on Spring Street, right behind Mr. Smith's pawn shop on Magnolia Street. I would rebuild and tune pianos in that space. Unknown to me, there was a band that would come and practice there. The key that I used to get into the warehouse had a tag on it that had my name on it, Marshall Tucker. And how the story went, that was told to me, the band was going under the name of the Toy Factory, which was the name after the founding member, Toy Caldwell. And they said that the name just wasn't going over. So they had been seeing my name on that key tag, and one of them said, 'Let's just name it the Marshall Tucker Band. I'm hungry, let's go eat.' And that was it. Our paths crossed, but we didn't even know it." After the time of this interview, Marshall Tucker was just 1 week away from turning 97 years old. He was a piano tuner for 50 years. Even though he was blind since birth, he said God had blessed him with perfect pitch. He has tuned pianos for many well-known performers, including Lawrence Welk and Lee Liberace. He was married to his wife Lois for 50 years, who was also blind. Marshall Tucker passed away January 20th, 2023. He was 99 years old. In the beginning, Toy was the main songwriter, and it pretty much stayed that way through the band's time together. And of course, the first album had the hit song Can't You See on it. Now, the studio version of this song is good, but later, on the Searching for a Rainbow album, a live version recorded in 1974 was added. And just in my opinion, the guitar work in it was much more heartfelt and really gave an idea to how great of a guitarist Toy was. His vocals were top-notch on this live version too. Toy said he wrote Can't You See long before the Marshall Tucker Band came to be. The later hits, like This Old Cowboy and Heard It in a Love Song, he said were written on the bus or in a motel room while traveling to and from shows. One of their biggest hit songs not written by Toy was Fire on the Mountain from the Searching for a Rainbow album. There's a few good stories about this song. George McCorkle, who also played guitar for the band, wrote this song and said he actually wrote the song for Charlie Daniels, who at that time was working on an album of his own, which was titled Fire on the Mountain. Now, Charlie liked the tune and even played the fiddle on the recording with them, but just didn't think the song would fit in the concept of his album. So it was to go on Marshall Tucker's Searching for a Rainbow album and become one of their biggest hits. Toy was to play the steel guitar on this song. Now, according to George, Toy had just bought the steel guitar and was learning the instrument. He said Toy didn't even have it tuned properly. Now, I don't know much about steel guitars, but it sure sounds in tune on the recording. Maybe someone out there who knows a little more about the steel guitar can explain what George might have meant by not tuned properly. If so, leave a comment. The original band members included Toy, his younger brother Tommy, who played bass, Doug Gray, who was the lead vocalist and played some percussion, George McCorkle, guitar, Paul Riddle, drums, and Jerry Eubanks, who handled the flute and saxophone. The band produced 14 albums between 1973 and 1984. 7 of those albums went gold and 2 of them went platinum. On March 28, 1980, Toy and Tommy Caldwell's youngest brother, Tim, was killed in an auto accident. He was only 24 years old. And then, on April 22, 1980, Tommy Caldwell was driving to the local YMCA in Spartanburg, and his off-road Jeep collided with another vehicle. On April 28, exactly 1 month after his youngest brother Tim died, Tommy Caldwell passed away from his injuries. He was 30 years old. The band had just released their 10th album, titled 10th. It was the last album Tommy was to appear on. And in my opinion, their run was just about over at that time. They would release a few more albums after this, but they just didn't have the feel their earlier music did. After a solid 10-year run in 1983, Toy Caldwell, drummer Paul Riddle, and George McCorkle left the band, and Toy basically retired from music for a few years. He spent time with his family and did a little fishing and just relaxed. But he still kept writing songs and decided to go out and try it on his own. He came out with a solo album in 1992 and got back out there and was really promoting it. On the morning of February 25th, 1993, Toy Caldwell was found by his wife Abby dead in his bed. Toy had been sick the night before with a cough and chest cold, she said. She left him to sleep about 3 a.m., and when she went back in to check on him at 8:30, he was dead. Though the initial cause of death was reported as cardiorespiratory failure due to viral myocarditis, but when Spartanburg County Coroner Jim Burnett requested a toxicology test from the State Law Enforcement Division after an autopsy failed to show the cause of death, those test results sent to Burnett ruled that the death was accidental, but that Caldwell's heart stopped beating and he quit breathing because of cocaine. The coroner said, "We have ruled that he died as a result of cardiorespiratory arrest due to cocaine ingestion. The amount of the drug ingested could not be determined. The toxicology test also showed the presence of the drug diazepam, commonly known as Valium, in Caldwell's system." Burnett said, "Valium is sometimes used by cocaine users to come down from a cocaine high." The family was surprised by the findings of the coroner's office, but certainly they accept that, said attorney Ken Anthony, who was asked by the family to speak on their behalf. Certainly the family did not think that he had any kind of problem, and certainly they did not think it was a major factor in his death, Anthony said, adding that Caldwell had been ill. Anthony said family members had no indication that Caldwell had been using cocaine before his death. So there's that. Did the family know? Honestly, there's a good chance they didn't. Many musicians led lifestyles out on the road that they either didn't bring home or hid it very well if they did. I would guess after his death someone found something in his bedroom when cleaning up, and they knew then. It is very possible. Just my opinion here, but when Tommy Caldwell passed, I think that took a part of the band away that they never really recovered. Every time I saw them live, one of my favorite parts of the show was Tommy's bass solo on 24 Hours at a Time. I never saw him play it the same way twice. Next to his brother Toy, he had the fastest thumb I ever saw. Doug Gray, who is the lead vocalist on most of their hit songs, is still active and takes the band out on the road. He turned 75 this year. He said he still enjoys getting out and performing for the fans. Flute and sax player Jerry Eubanks stayed with the band until 1996, and then he decided to retire and get off the road. Drummer Paul Riddle, who left along with Toy and George McCorkle in 1983, is still active playing and teaching drums. Guitarist George McCorkle, who wrote the Marshall Tucker classic song Fire on the Mountain, passed away in 2007. The band always gave credit to Jimmy Hall of the Wet Willie Band for getting their foot in the door at Capricorn Records, and the Allman Brothers Band, who first took them out on the road to open their shows. Toy said they put us in front of millions of people. And of course, Charlie Daniels, who played a lot of fiddle on some of the earlier recordings. Hope you enjoyed this video on Toy Caldwell and the Marshall Tucker Band. If you have anything to add, please feel free to do so in the comments section. And thank you all for your support of the channel.